Hey, thank you everyone for joining. A few housekeeping items before we get started is one, feel free to ask questions or to submit comments about things we're saying if you think what we're saying is not completely true or if there's been an update recently. This is technology and things move quickly. Let us know. We'd love to hear it. Also, if there's anything that you'd like to hear about that we didn't get to, we will have Q&A at the end. And throughout the presentation, if you have something you want us to get to, you don't have to worry about forgetting. Just go ahead and enter it in the question function. For those of you joining from a mobile device or a tablet, you should find the questions option at the bottom part of the screen on your tablet or phone. And you hit that, and then you'll be able to chat with us or ask us any questions. Everyone here, thank you for coming, and we will be thanking you additionally with a Visa gift card that you'll get via email by the end of next week. And maybe it gives you a little holiday coffee, lunch purchase as you're doing last minute shopping. And then at the end of the session, we will be announcing the winner of the Amazon Echo. So stick around so that we can get you both your gift card for showing up and sticking around, and also maybe you get a new toy. And for those of you who might have to ditch out early or have other people that you'd like to share this with, we will be posting a recording of the presentation on the Pivotalogic site within the next week as well. So we'll be in contact, and you can always give us a call and let us know that you'd like to see it, and we can help you out. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Phil to get us started.
Thank you, Derek. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. My name is Philip Geyer. I'm the CIO of Pivotalogic. Thank you very much for joining today. We're in Minnesota, so it's a whopping 18 degrees today. So hopefully it's much warmer where you're at. I'm very privileged to have Derek Wood from Infrastructure with us today to discuss 3 must-known ransomware trends in 2018. So with that, let's take a peek at the agenda for today's webinar. So here's the agenda. We're going to cover off on introduction, why we're here. We're going to talk a little bit about our mission. We're going to talk about how is ransomware winning and what can we do to beat it. So we're here today to discuss a major security problem that we need to be addressed in 2018 to keep our business protected and your data secure. I felt it was important to discuss how ransomware is winning and what we can do to beat it and minimize downtime to your business. We felt it critical to partner with Infrascale, who is the leader and visionary in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, to help us prevent ransomware or how to recover more quickly if you do get it. We also will provide solutions from Pivotalogic and do-it-yourself advice to keep your business running smoothly. Quickly, I wanted to just talk a little bit about Pivotalogic and what we do. So we specialize in building hybrid IT solutions and deliver expert IT consulting. Our goal is to keep IT simple and act as your general contractor to help solve your biggest IT problems. A lot of times, companies are started in people's garage, they're started in the basement, they're on a boat. We have a fairly unique story too. Pivotalogic was started with a conversation in a parking lot with a company that was frustrated with IT and they needed to make a pivot to a new provider, hence Pivotalogic. But they didn't know where to start. So we soon discovered a gap in the marketplace to help simplify complex IT by finding partners that could deliver quality services at an affordable cost, which would allow customers to focus on delivering their services more efficiently to their customers. So for the past 20 years, our founders have built long-term relationships with customers in the SMB, government, K-12, legal, and manufacturing verticals. And we have over 650 strategic partners like Infrascale, Equinix, Amazon, and Azure to help solve IT's biggest problems. So we're addressing disaster recovery, security, networking, managed services, application selection, and we also provide excellent expert IT consulting. So we act as your general contractor, and we provide the right people, tools, and services necessary for the construction and success of your IT project. So hopefully that gives you a quick overview of what we're going to go over today, a little bit about Pivotalogic, and now I'll turn it over to Derek to provide a quick introduction of Infrascale. Derek?
Thank you. So InfraScale, first and foremost, is a cloud software development company, and we build tools that allow partners of ours like Pivotalogic to deliver valuable and critical services to their customers. So we are 100% channel focused, and we work with our partners to help them promote and deliver the services that you need. InfraScale was really formed off of a kind of a personal.
Hello, I think we may have lost audio. Anybody else lose audio?
Can everyone hear me? Check, check, check. Okay, now we're back. Thanks everyone for being so quick on the chat. That's what it's there for. So, InfraScale is a cloud software company first and foremost, and that's really what differentiates us from the rest of the market when it comes to disaster recovery services. Disaster recovery providers historically have been largely hardware based, and that makes it very expensive, and that's why most SMBs just didn't have any true disaster recovery option. So you had to stick with backup choices, and backup is great and it helps prevent data loss, but downtime is still a major component that you just don't have any protection against if all you have is a backup tool. And we'll explain the differences in why backup certainly has its place, but when it comes to combating downtime, backup doesn't really fill the role. So InfraScale specializes in working with partners like Pivotalogic, so we build the tools they need to do their job effectively. So nothing else Pivotalogic does, making you more efficient, more productive, and saving money, none of that matters if they can't keep you running after something bad happens. And in the world of technology, bad things happen all the time. Hardware fails, ransomware is a major problem, and that's what we're going to be focusing a lot on today, because there really hasn't been a new threat to using computers in the last 30 years. And then ransomware came along and it just shifted everything that we knew or thought we knew about cybersecurity and good disaster recovery plans. The Magic Quadrant, just for those of you who are not so familiar, Gartner is a company that does enterprise IT evaluations, and the Magic is their evaluation criteria. So they have experts from all over the world for all different markets, and they come up with really solid criteria on which to gauge different vendors. And then their quadrant is how they kind of stack rank everybody. We were very excited to be ranked as a leader in this year's Gartner Magic Quadrant for Disaster Recovery as a Service. And the reason is because we are doing things that other providers simply can't do, and we're doing it at a cost that is a fraction of what they can possibly attempt to do it at. And the reason, again, is because of our expertise in cloud software. Now, you think, okay, well, we're not enterprise, so it doesn't apply to us. Well, Gartner had the same type of feedback, and for the last couple of years they started building a compendium report where they re-rank all the vendors based on environment complexity. So the SMB space, that's 0 to or 5 to 500 employees, is generally going to be in your low complexity and medium complexity environments, in which InfraScale is at the top, and that doesn't take cost into consideration. If you took cost in consideration, hands down, it's the only viable option. So our mission is two-part. We build tools to help Pivotalogic help you avoid data loss and downtime. So those are separate separate issues, and you have separate solutions. Now, until recently, with the launch of our service making it so affordable, downtime really wasn't something the SMB could address because disaster recovery is hardware-based and that's very expensive. By leveraging the cloud, we've made it affordable for everyone. The thing with downtime is, one, you need to know what your cost of downtime is. And that's something that Pivotalogic can do with a quick 15-minute phone call, after this webinar, tomorrow, later this week, anytime. Give them a call, they'll help you out. Once you understand your cost of downtime, then you can start understanding where you need to pay attention to. But it still requires a bit of expertise on the IT side of things to understand what the causes of downtime are. It's not just natural disasters. If that were the case, then a small portion of the country would need it, right? Only the areas that have seasonal disasters, hurricane zones, tornado, floods, these sorts of things. But the biggest causes of downtime and data loss are things that have no borders, no geography, and no season. Hardware failure, human error, software failure, and ransomware isn't on this because it's a whole category unto its own because it's become so major. So that'll bring us to our first poll. We have 3, so we hope that you can all give us an answer to all 3 polls. This helps us kind of understand where we need to focus today. But do you know your cost of downtime? So you have no, but it's not good. A rough idea means maybe you've had some downtime in the past, but it's still not calculated. So you know about how much you can withstand. And then the yes, that's why we're here, that's awesome. And the fact that you're already that far along means that when you call Pivotalogic, maybe it's only a 5-minute conversation and you get an actual evaluation. So we'll close that now and I'll share the results. So we have 14% saying no, but it's not good, and 57% saying rough idea, but not formally calculated, and 29% saying yes, that's why we're here. So we actually have kind of an abnormally aware group today, which is terrific. That means that as we talk through this, these things should make a lot of sense, and it's good that you know what your risk is. One of the biggest reasons we find that small businesses don't fare so well when something bad does happen is because they're just not minding the store, right? So no one's minding the store, you get robbed type of thing. So with ransomware, I like this quote: never before in the history of humankind have people across the world been subjected to extortion on a massive scale as they are today. And this was in 2015. This before it even became even a fraction of how big it was, as big as it is today. Some stats about how big it is today. So last year, so July 2016, it was estimated that a new business in North America was infected every 2 minutes. July 2017, that number dropped from 2 minutes to 40 seconds. That's a 3-fold increase in the number of attacks that happen every day. I'm sorry, not even attacks, infections. Of these people that get infected, 72% of these businesses are down for at least 2 days. 72%, at least 2 days. And 2 doesn't sound like a frightening thing. Oh, it's just 2 days. I don't even need to open my whole hand to count to 2. That's not that big of a deal. But downtime is one of those things that is sneaky. It has long coattails as far as the damages it causes to your business. It's not just a single point of damage. It has a ripple effect throughout your whole organization, the organizations that you work with, your customers and their customers, and it has a lot of pain. 80% of businesses that go down for more than 2 days go out of business within a year. I'll say that again. If your business goes down for more than 2 days, you have an 80% chance that you won't be in business by the end of the next 12 months. Now that is a staggering statistic to look at and to think, wow, well maybe we really do need to pay attention to our downtime and make sure that we have some plans in place. And then we have one of the trends that we're going to dive into a little more, but there's been a 2,500% increase in criminal spending in the ransomware market since 2016. That means huge numbers of criminal organizations have not just only shifted their business from data theft and identity theft to ransomware, but they've also seen a huge increase in the number of criminal organizations. We simply haven't seen a organized crime market this large ever. This is, really kind of a pivotal point in cybercrime, and will be made famous by some of these names that some of you have heard. So this year we had WannaCry in May, and WannaCry set the record for largest cyber attack in history, which was previously held by the Storm virus, I believe back in 2007, and that was when social engineering first became a thing. Immediately following the WannaCry attack in May that took out companies like some big names like the NHS in the UK, it took down Maersk, which I believe handles 30 to 35% of all shipments in the world. Really big names, and then hundreds of thousands of other small businesses. The NotPetya attack and the Bad Rabbit attack were kind of copycats of a previous virus from 2014 known as Petya. Petya, Russian-based, by name, it's a Russian name. It's a Russian-based attack, and what was unique about Petya and Bad Rabbit is that they didn't use phishing as their way to infect businesses. In fact, there was no user interaction at all. What they did is they were able to infiltrate an automatic update through various financial software programs. So just updating your financial software all of a sudden infected your whole business and took you down. That is just, and again, another shift in these trends that we're seeing in how ransomware is being propagated. So the three main trends we're going to talk about, and then we're going to go into some specific examples. One is the targeting of the SMB space is really, it's kind of a double down. So in 2015, ransomware was, 2013 to 2015, it was really targeting individuals. And once whatever machine is infected, or that was the machine, that was the only machine that it was going to infect. And they were asking for a very small amount of money, but it was just one person affected. 2016, they started targeting businesses. So the people became entry points. So they're kind of like inviting the vampire into the house, bypassing all your security software and protocols. And they're doubling down on that with more sophisticated vertical specific attacks. So looking at healthcare, education, manufacturing, retail, government. These criminal organizations can see, okay, what are the most common types of databases, programs, applications, what are some common types of email communication, and then they hit you in all fronts. And it's really becoming a bigger and bigger problem. The shift from cybercrime of targeting big, huge databases like LinkedIn and Sony and Experian, the trend has gone away from those types of attacks because they're very expensive and the ROI takes years. The LinkedIn and Experian exploits were years ago. So when you go to ransomware, your ROI is the day that you launch your ransomware campaign because you don't have a complex laundering process and it's just easier to make money. So now the shift is, let's not make a lot of money per hit. Let's make a little bit of money 100,000 times or hundreds of thousands of times. And that's what we're seeing today. The other trend is the creation of a whole ransomware criminal economy. And the third is a reduction in malware-based attacks, which again changes the way we look at preventative measures. So to talk about the ransomware economy is what we are using to describe right now the economy on the dark web of buying and selling ransomware software and additional services. So hacking groups like the shadow brokers have come back to light after being somewhat subdued for the last few years. And the reason is because the ransomware market is demanding more and better exploits that aren't already being blocked or protected against. So shadow brokers, they were the ones that stole the exploits from the CIA that were used by the WannaCry attack, so the external blue exploit. They stole 18 different exploits, and so far we've only seen one used in the wild, so we have 17 more to kind of expect to come down the line at some point. And they launched a exploit of the month club, like not a joke, it's hacking as a service type of thing. And then the spending that we've seen on the black market has gone up 2,500%. The trend of such an explosive growth in any type of market means that it's going to gain some attention and more people are going to continue to enter it. And I feel like almost like a broken record, because every year, every 3 months, there's some new development or some new big splash in ransomware, and it does exactly what we expect it to do, because it's a natural market behavior. People make money doing something, other people see that, and then they want to get a piece. And the market keeps growing and growing and growing until eventually it levels out. We have no idea when this will ever level out. It just keeps growing and growing, and there's no signs of it slowing down. Now, the other trend, which is especially important to understand going into 2018, is that our preventative measures are becoming more and more out of date with what the newer technologies are being developed by these criminals. So a non-malware based attack means that there is no application to block or to look for. Think of this as an autoimmune disease with your computer, right? So they're using encryption libraries and other executables that are on your machine already that are required for it to run, and they're using it against you. You know, Infrascale uses encryption libraries that are come standard on Windows to protect you from things. They're using those same things to ransom you for your data. So it's these types of attacks that, you know, prevention is always kind of known as never being 100%, but the amount of money that's being poured into this criminal industry means that you really need to be sure that you have a way to recover from this, because if you have a good recovery solution, you're going to be okay. But if your whole security plan is based on prevention, that is becoming less and less of a good idea every day that we go on. So the challenges with ransomware, it's not the amount of ransom. That's usually the first question people ask. And it's not that much money, and that's by design. The design of the ransomware attacks is to make it a palatable amount of money that they could get hundreds of thousands of times. If they were to ask for $20,000 from individuals, they probably would have made zero money. But instead, they asked for just a couple hundred, maybe 100, 200, 300. And a lot of people would be willing to pay that to save family pictures or, you know, any pictures that weren't protected. And then you talk about a business and the same type of thing. If it's a small amount of money and you don't have a backup in place, then, you know, paying that amount of ransom is not that big of a deal. It's not going to break the bank. But that's not the problem. And with ransomware, you really only have two options. You either can restore from a backup or DR system that you have, or you pay the ransom. And both have kind of caveats, right? So paying the ransom, you still have a chance that your data won't be returned. And the reason largely is not because you can't trust cyber criminals, although that would make sense. It's bad for them if you don't get your data back. Usually the reason is software issues. So in the early days of ransomware, there were a lot of copycats and they just had bad ransomware code, and it would accidentally corrupt the data it was encrypting, so you couldn't get it. And if you pay the ransom, you're not avoiding downtime. It still takes a few days to decrypt all your files and then do a reaccounting and make sure everything's working properly. So paying the ransom very quickly is usually not an option unless you already have Bitcoins. So it's usually a couple days to get your Bitcoin account set up and then make the payment. And then it's another couple of days to decrypt everything. So you're 3 to 5 days down just by paying out the ransom. And if you restore, your restoration speed is critical, right? We already talked about that 80% figure of businesses that go out of business just for being down, over 2 days. So it's really important to understand that you do have the restore plan in place, and that's also what we find to be rather uncommon. Most people, especially when you talk about compliance, compliance only really affects the minimum requirements of keeping data available for those that need it, right? Compliance, you won't find in any compliance a downtime protection option. It's always in the context of if a court orders to see data, you need to be able to get it within 30 days. I've seen some CIO policies where it's, maybe within a week, but that doesn't help the business that is down. So your compliance should be a minimum requirement, not your maximum. If you get infected, the absolute first thing should be you should already have a plan of what to do. This is too big of an issue to not have an open discussion with all of your employees and let them know that there is no shooting the messenger, that we're all in this together, and if you get an infection, to stop what you're doing, don't touch anything and call the techs. Let the techs get in and deal with this. And the reason is because this isn't a standard virus removal. If you remove the ransomware virus from your machine before you verify your backups, you've also just removed your option to even pay the ransom, which if you don't have a proper system may be an absolute necessity, is to pay and get your data back, especially if you have compliance issues or if we have any police agencies on the line, and your evidence server gets encrypted, you need to be able to get that data back. That's what you need to do. And then once you get your techs involved, they'll be able to look up the variant that's attacked you and know what the next steps are, because they're not all the same. With WannaCry, if you left your machine on, then you would have been able to use a decryption tool because their software was actually pretty junior. And so somebody built a decryption tool within a couple of days of that launch happening. But if you weren't paying attention to the threats in the market, like the Pivotalogic team will, then you wouldn't know that. On the other hand, with the NotPetya virus, the first thing you would want to do if you saw that screen is pull the plug, because that screen was the beginning of the encryption. So if you pull the plug and turn the machine off, you stop the encryption, and you'd probably be able to recover most of your files without doing anything else. So first is have qualified people that are responsible for it and have a plan. Okay, so how ransomware eliminates your backup. I have 5 major areas. I'm going to run through this pretty quickly so that we can have time for Q&A at the end. Right, and we have a bunch of educators here, so there is correlation and causation true. So there is no way to show that the downtime event was the cause of those businesses going out of business, but the correlation is pretty strong and shouldn't be ruled out just because causation isn't 100%. Good point, Charles. Okay, lone wolf myth. So the lone wolf myth is really just understanding what we're dealing with. Historically, a lot of businesses could rely on the fact that you weren't high profile to not get targeted, because cyber criminals were only targeting high profile people with a lot of good data to steal or to try to sift. That's no longer the case. They're now targeting you because you are small. That's the reason. You're an easy target. These are really quite organized businesses that just operate on the wrong side of the law. They have product roadmaps, they have development teams, they're going to have probably board meetings, they're going to have ROI analysis, and then they're going to evolve and adjust as they need to increase their profits. That's it. So just understanding that piece alone can go a long way to understand it, to setting yourself up with a good protection plan. One of the examples I like to show is this variant called Spora. Spora was developed as a ransomware as a service model. So you don't even have to purchase this with cash outright. There is an affiliate option. So people will get a full, well-working piece of ransomware code and the exploit kit and everything for nothing. And then it goes into an affiliate model based on what's recorded is going through. And we found this when experts at different security firms found campaign IDs and different tracking mechanisms. One of the things you'll also notice is that the UI doesn't look anything like what you think about when you hear the word ransomware. There's no skull and crossbones. It's not neon. It's not weird, scary language. Okay, the dollar sign is on the wrong side, and it's obviously not built in a Western country. The thing that you'll also notice is that the color scheme is quite nice. So even the reds and the yellows are quite soft as to pull your attention but not scare you away. There's a chat support, so you actually will have a human that will help you through the whole process, and they'll stick with you from the moment you get infected to the moment that you've used their decryption key to decrypt your last file. And then they're going to send you a customer support survey and ask you how it was. It's not a joke, and I hear that their support is actually quite good. But Our goal is to avoid having to deal with that altogether. The point of this is the amount of time and effort put into developing a nice user experience for ransomware is telling of how serious and how major this market has become and will continue to grow. The second trend was one that I had mentioned kind of at the beginning, targeting your business. The reason the SMB market is the largest and most commonly targeted market in the world with ransomware today is because statistically, SMBs are just not well equipped to handle any type of major recovery. Statistically, 35% of SMBs still don't have any type of backup in place at all. And those that do are likely to have something rather basic. It's certainly not going to be a disaster recovery option to address downtime. And in my experience, I've found that it's usually going to be a single machine, usually a single server or maybe a couple of servers, but all of your endpoints, which is where ransomware enters, are completely exposed. So even if you have the ability to recover server data, you're still going to be exposed to losing the data that's being created and stored on your endpoints. And despite all of our best efforts, users find a way not to save things on the server. We all kind of know that. From there, you have the top verticals that are targeted by ransomware organizations. So industrial services, like the Bay Area Rapid Transit System was shut down not too long ago. Medical facilities are huge because downtime isn't just losing money, you're talking about human lives on the line. So it literally becomes a life or death situation to have a good backup and DR plan in place. Financial services, government agencies, educational, and retail, because retail is about having shopping carts up and all this. So these are all the major industries, and by targeting these, they've had to up their game in terms of how they penetrate, because naturally those industries have security compliance and compliance for backup, so they have to understand what those are, understand what the common scenario, let's call them solutions are out there, and then develop their product, ransomware, to still win and get that money. So one of the first things that we saw was targeting critical systems. So targeting critical systems is not an accident. The way ransomware works today is it enters your machine. Well, let's start with how it did start. Before, it would enter the end user's machine through phishing or a drive-by download, which doesn't require any user interaction at all, or whatever means, and then it would slowly start encrypting files in the background until you get this notice. Today, it enters the end user's machine and stays quiet, and it purposefully avoids known antivirus and anti-malware programs, and it's just as kind of a Mr. Sniffy across your network. Who am I connected to and what am I connected to? And it's looking for specifically your on-site backups, and it's going to spread to all the other users and just kind of wait dormant. And then once it identifies access through an exploit in an operating system, an application, a network, firewall, whatever it may be that they're going to use, then they immediately start encrypting those critical systems. Did we lose audio again?
No, we're good.
Oh, we're good, okay. So once they have locked up your critical systems, all the other machines start getting encrypted as well. And but the primary goal was to get those critical applications. Everything else is a bonus. It makes it harder to recover, which means your downtime is more painful, which means you're more willing to pay if your backup scenario doesn't really have a well thought out or defined recovery plan, or if maybe your backups just don't give you a very good recovery option. And that all assumes that your backups weren't encrypted along with all your files, encrypted or deleted, which is a common way of going about it. So eliminating your backups. So the most common style of backup is to do a backup to an on-site network location, right? This network location stores these backup files, and the administrator has access to those. So if the ransomware's goal is to get administrative access to your network, it means it has administrative access to your backups. So what it'll do, like Spora, for example, will run a couple of things to throw a monkey wrench into IT's general steps of what to do when viruses lock you out of your computer, like changes to boot status policies, disabling Windows startup repair. and it'll delete any backup files that it finds, volume shadow copies, and then whatever it can't delete, it'll try to encrypt. So the whole goal, again, is to take off. You only have two options: recover from a backup or pay the ransom. They're trying to remove the second option. Quite a logical approach for the criminals. And the thing to note is that there are appliances that are not susceptible to this. So Infrascale is an example of that, and a lot of the higher end appliances are, because the administrator won't actually have access to play with the data on the machine. They'll have to go through the product user interface. But a lot of the backup tools that have existed in the past, StorageCraft, Datto, just doing built-in bare metal backups to a network drive or an external drive, those are susceptible to this type of attack because they're just sitting as normal files in an open system. Whereas our code is built for a lot of other magic and efficiencies and encryption, compression, dedupe, things that we do for inline dedupe when we're transferring to make recovery and replication offsite a lot faster. So we lock everyone out of our system. And while there is no encryption that can't be broken, it's all about the amount of time it would take to break it. And the amount of time it would take to break 256 AES really isn't really cost effective for anyone. The fifth reason that most people have a bad time, and probably the most disappointing, is that your recovery is simply too slow. And this is so common because a lot of times, the backup is getting set up in place and it's just to check the box. We have to get the backup in place because of compliance. And that's the critical point for a lot of the stakeholders in getting that set up. So it means that the decision is usually based on speed of setup and cost alone. But if you're not planning your backup solution with a recovery plan in mind, then you're going to have a bad time no matter what the scenario is. This is just a short graph that kind of shows, the information we can help you understand your cost of downtime, both an opportunity cost and hard costs, so that we can show very specific scenarios of if ransomware were to hit your central server and 80% of your endpoints, how long would it take to recover? This is a critical question to have answered today, and that answer needs to be same day recovery at worst. If you can get it within 4 hours, that's pretty good. Our system and our partners typically experience no more than 2 hours, closer to 1. Thanks for that, Jen. So to show an example of backup versus disaster recovery, is backup, again, is designed for data loss protection. So it's going to take your data, move it somewhere, and keep it there as long as something doesn't move it, and allow you to get that data back. But if you're in a scenario where the entire organization is not operable, just handing over a bunch of data doesn't end the sky from falling. The sky is still falling, your hair's still on fire. There are a ton of steps that go into actually getting your network back up and running that backup doesn't address because it's not designed to. Disaster recovery, on the other hand, is exactly that. It's designed to have a recovery environment available for you when you need it, so that when you need to recover entire systems, entire networks, you can do that very quickly. So with a backup scenario, just for a single database, it may be 4 to 5 hours in a best case scenario to get a single database recovered from a backup. With a disaster recovery system, specifically Infrascale's, it's a couple of minutes because it's just designed to do that. And that's the difference. And backup certainly has its place. Your endpoints to make sure the data is not lost, awesome. It probably doesn't affect the business too much to have one employee down and without a machine for a couple of days. But if everyone in the company is down for a couple of days, that's awful. And then if you take just a single database, okay, that's 4 or 5 hours versus 1 or 2 minutes, and then you apply that to an entire network, which is what ransomware typically results in, right? That's the other problem is before ransomware, there was no full site recovery scenario short of a natural disaster or a fire. It just didn't happen. You have a hardware failure, and that's one thing to fix, and everything gets back up and running. Ransomware now makes full site recovery quite a regular use case, to the point where you need to start addressing that. You need to know how long it takes to do a full site recovery. Knowing how long it takes to recover a single file is no longer adequate for having a true protection plan in place. You have to get your domain controller up and running, and there's dependencies with different app servers, mail servers, your database, and then once those are all tested and put together, then you can have the web server and the file server. And then once those are configured correctly and tested, then you can start plugging in some users. As long as that works out, then you plug in the rest. So there's a lot of steps involved. And one of the things that we've done to try to automate this and to try to make it simpler so that there's not as much learning as you go is, when you get disaster recovery set up on site, one of the first things that our team will help with, as well as Pivotalogic, is to set up a full site recovery plan in what we call boot orchestration. So this orchestrates or plans out what a full site recovery would look like in terms of which machines are going to get booted first, and you have that first group. How much wait time do you need in between that, so you can run different runbooks or scripts to do those configuration changes, and then it goes on to the next group, and then same thing. This significantly simplifies and reduces the risk of error and the risk and the delay in learning what the next step is. I've always found that recovery plans are documented quite general, because there's no way to be so specific without having a full-time person constantly updating every configuration option that you have. But with boot orchestration, you can save a ton of time by having this ready. And again, we're using the cloud as the recovery environment, and you don't have to pay for additional hardware, and it just makes it a lot faster and simpler. And Phil, you've been on the front lines doing this forever, until the beginning of the tape days. Why don't you give us a quick rundown of what a difference it is to have a backup system versus a disaster recovery system?
Yeah, thanks, Derek. I appreciate it. So yeah, we've been doing this since 1999. So we've seen everything from the SunGuard days to restore from tapes, to ship your tapes, to multiple data centers and $1 million solutions. But I think a misconception of backup and DR, that's definitely something that we see that people get confused with, especially people that aren't in IT. Business people think that, we're protected, but we don't really have the investment into DR that's going to allow us to have a recoverable plan and then minimize downtime. One example recently was with a government city. I think they had like 50,000 residents. They had a current environment. They're backing up to the SAN, including their CGIS data, which is kind of a red flag. And they're replicating data from production data center at City Hall to another city office 10 miles away. So there's kind of another red flag. But I think IT felt comfortable they could restore their data until they got hit by a DDoS attack. And they really kind of were down for like 2 to 3 days trying to deal with a DDoS attack. And the CFO began to ask questions about their security posture with all the news and ransomware. So we started to really dig in to figure out, do we have a backup? Can we recover from ransomware? And really started to push IT on, do we have a backup and can we recover? And what's the impact of a disaster? How much data do we lose? Can we perform our jobs? And really concerned about reputation took a hit. And he told me point blank, I don't want to be in the news. So I think many customers think backup is disaster recovery, but it's not. So we kind of went in there and looked at their environment, and what they thought they had with backup. They had no testing backups to make sure they were successful. They didn't document procedure for backups. Only one person kind of knew how to back it up, but that's not good. If he gets hit by a bus or gets sick or quits, no one else can really recover or do his job. And they're backing up directly to the SAN, which you recommended to kind of back up to a server on site and then to the cloud. And they had no documented recovery plan for ransomware or unplanned outage. They didn't do any testing. Applications weren't aligned to recovery objectives. So you can see there's a lot of components that go into disaster recovery. but it's not just the backup. So one thing with, InfraScale, we're really excited about it, that they can really put together a plan that's going to do more with less. They're going to be able to automate a lot of the features and functions, orchestration, and also we're going to be able to do unlimited testing to make sure when we need it, it's going to work properly.
Yeah, and that's really the point. It's I've been in backup and DR for the last 10 years, so not quite as long as Philip, but the common scenario is you go down and customers want to know how long before your backup. And unfortunately, the only guarantee the techs can give you is the next point at which they're going to have an update, right? They can tell you what they're doing, what they're working on, and that they'll have an update for you in an hour. And then they'll have an update for you after another hour, and then another hour. And then they won't know when the downtime will officially be over until they're about halfway through or even more. But with a system like ours, you will know how long you will have a maximum amount of downtime before a disaster even strikes and before a recovery plan even starts. Because by using the cloud as a recovery point, the recovery steps for your entire business is the same no matter what happens. And that's the critical difference. And that's why we've been just catapulted in the Gartner rankings. 2 years ago, we got kind of the honorable mention, oh, well, InfraScale's here. They did well enough to make it into our evaluation. We'll see what they do. And then 2 years later, we're a leader next to IBM. And IBM starts at $250,000 in hardware just to have the conversation. So our second poll, we'll do this pretty quickly because I'm running short on time, and I want to get to some of your questions. How would ransomware recovery work out for you? And I actually changed some of the answers here. So first would just be bad. You don't have to tell us how bad. You'd be able to recover your full network within a few days. You'd be able to recover within 1 day or recover within 4 hours. I probably should have added a I don't know option here. If you don't know, I'd categorize that as bad. That's information you absolutely need to get. That would be a definite to do. Is what would our response be if everything was down and we had no on-site backups? How can we recover? So this is good. So we have 17% of you say that you could recover within 4 hours. Now that's pretty great. And if that means you have a DR solution in place, and maybe there's still an opportunity for us to save you quite a bit of money, because when it comes to a cost-effective DR option, we haven't found anyone that matches our functionality and comes anywhere close to the price. And again, that's because we don't have to pass on costs from other third parties. We've developed our own backend so that we can give you a very affordable price for the service. This is a quote from Bruce Schneier, who's a well-renowned professor and security guru in the United States. And this quote's actually from 2003, where ransomware kind of peeped up, because ransomware's been around for about 30 years. It just, no one really did anything with it until cryptocurrency came around. And he says this in every one of his books and every one of his blogs and speaking engagements about cybersecurity is the number one thing is to have a good backup strategy. If you're going to cut corners, it better not be in the last option you have to recover, because when it comes to fighting crime, the criminals have the advantage because they are the ones that are innovating new ways to attack us, and then we have to react to that. But if you have a really good backup and disaster recovery plan, you'll always be able to get back up and running. So our solution, again, we have a guarantee that we can get you any machine up and running in our cloud in 15 minutes or less. And we've found that our average recovery is actually less than 2 minutes, about 1 minute and 30 seconds or so. So you can test that out with us too. When you're looking at DR trade-offs from there's always kind of the performance versus costs matrix that you have to evaluate. Traditionally, the SMB market was pretty much limited by price to backup systems. So offsite tape, cloud backup, or appliance-based backup. And all of these they don't have a recovery environment, which is a huge part of the time it takes to recover from something like ransomware. When you go to DR, really it's that they become so cost prohibitive because it's a near duplication of your entire infrastructure. And that duplication of infrastructure is a duplicate of the man hours that go into managing it, monitoring it, updating it, making sure that it will be available for you. And it just becomes super out of range when it comes to budget. By leveraging the cloud, we've now actually saved organizations a ton of money. We had, some state government offices that were using offsite tape backup, and we saved, I believe it was about 20 to 30% on their total cost of ownership. So if you're just looking at the cost of tape, that's not what I'm saying. That is the cheapest storage medium in the world. But we're not doing storage. We're talking about disaster recovery, which is very complicated. So we actually are cheaper than offsite tape backup when it comes to total cost of ownership of this whole thing. The other thing that you'll find is that traditional DR services are going to be focused on usually just the critical servers. And the problem is that it leaves your remote offices and your endpoints completely exposed to data loss. With InfraScale, we have two pieces. We have disaster recovery for your critical systems that need to be up as often as possible, near 24/7. And then you have cloud backup, which will protect the data. So you won't lose data anywhere. And then you have your DR option for those critical systems, because sometimes DR will be overkill. You don't need it everywhere. And with the cost it is today, you probably couldn't afford to have it everywhere. The other big thing is how you can recover. There were a lot of DR systems. There's even one still active today, and a pretty big player that actually charges you to recover from their system, and they base it off of a percentage of how much data you're recovering. So if you need to recover a full site, that may cost $5,000 or $6,000 just to use the service you've already been paying for. We thought that was just ridiculous. We wanted to stop that. And I also, still very much remember the days of having customers come to us because of weird third-party licensing issues with weird third-party licensing programs for like granular recovery. So if you just need to recover an individual email, you shouldn't have to have a completely separate backup flow with separate licensing costs. You should just be able to do it, and that's what we've done for you. So we wanted to break open the market, not just by leveraging the cloud in a way that no one had before, but also by making the purchasing very simple. You don't have to go through all the different hardware configurations and see what hardware you want to buy and make choices of cost versus performance. We're going to give you the hardware that's going to run your gear in a adequate way, and that's part of what our team and the Pivotalogic team will do when we're assessing your site. So the first assessment, very quick, just downtime and your basic status as of what you have today. And then if you want to hear what we can do for you, then we would need to get some more detailed information about the environment, and then we could show you that we can provide you quite a good solution. So what does your experience look like with the combination of Pivotalogic and InfraScale? You go down, Pivotalogic gets on the web interface with InfraScale, and they boot up the machines that are down, and they reconnect the users, and it ends the downtime. And then they can start working on a production recovery. So I have a quick case study, and then I'm going to open up the question and answer, so we are coming up on the hour. So we had the University of Calgary and the University of Virginia, both of which were hit by ransomware last year. The University of Calgary was infected, and then it took them about 3 days to go through a recovery from their backups. And what they found is that they simply didn't have enough of the data on their backups to avoid paying out the ransom. So then, because they had no endpoint protection, so all of the data from the professors and the associates that was being paid for with grants was just going to be lost. So that wasn't an option. So it took them another 2 days to get a Bitcoin account set up and get the Bitcoins in there, make the payment, and then it took another 2 or 3 days to do the recovery. They ended up paying about $10,000 in ransom, which was nothing compared to the nearly 10 full days of downtime they had. Fortunately, they were one of the first major educational agencies to go public with their experience. And Ellen McCree, who's a systems analyst at the University of Virginia, read this, and realized that she had the same exact setup. So she quickly ran and found Infrascale, and she set it up. And one of the things that stood out to me when we were interviewing her for the case study was, I was sold as soon as I saw how fast the recovery was. In her career, she had never seen anything that easy and that fast. And she said, I was going to accept any asterisk you were going to throw at me as long as the recovery wasn't part of it. And to my surprise, everything worked the way you said it was. It was just as easy to set up as you explained. It was just as easy to use as I saw in the demo. And I just couldn't be happier. And she was hit by ransomware 3 years after getting set up. And she said she didn't even break a sweat. They were down for a total of 1.5 hours. And she attributed about half an hour to some bureaucracy permission to push the big red button. But bureaucracy should be included in your recovery plan. So 1.5 hours of downtime compared to 10 days and paying out $10,000 not only saved, probably her job, but it also let the other parts of the university, the other colleges, also adopt a similar option. And she had actually done demos for other techs in the other colleges because it's kind of keeping up with the Joneses, and why not see it in action if somebody else already has it? And so she was well prepared because the recovery she'd already done a few times, and then when it came to a real life scenario, it was like clockwork. Then I'll hand it back to Phil to close it up with us today. We're just going to skip this and we're just going to go to questions because we're over time. Okay, so would you like to be contacted? And now that the questions are up, Phil, any closing statements while we get some last poll answers?
Sure. So I guess I just want to thank everybody for joining today. It's a pretty in-depth conversation. I think it's a couple of basic scenarios you kind of fall into potentially is, if you know your downtime, that's good. We should be able to get some funding to have a more robust disaster recovery solution. Number two, I would say 75% of the customers don't know their downtime, and a lot of times don't know where to start to have a more robust disaster recovery plan. So, we're willing to sit down with you for 15 minutes to have a quick evaluation to see where some of the deficiencies may be in your plan, and look at a cost-effective solution through Infrascale to be able to put together a disaster recovery plan and protect you from ransomware and other unplanned disaster recoveries.
Terrific. Okay, so I'm going to start going through some questions, and then Phil, you get ready to announce a winner. I'll answer this one. I have 2 questions I want to answer, and then let's announce the winner. So first is, do you support Linux? Yes, so we have full Linux support, including the full functionality, so not just cheap support in that we can protect it, but not with DR. You can do cloud boot with Linux, all the major variants. So one of our platform kind of pillars is ubiquitous OS support. So whether it's hosted at Office 365 or hosted SharePoint or Windows or Linux or Macs, we're going to have you covered. All right, second question is, Phil mentioned unlimited recovery. What do you mean? And how much does it cost to keep things, how much does it cost to keep things running in your cloud? And can we leave it there? So first, I'll start backwards. So no, you don't want to leave it there because you're always going to have better performance on a local network than running across the WAN. So for a lot of times, that's one of the major reasons your organization is going to have a lot of the servers on site. And we just haven't built out our platform to sustain long-term running in our cloud. It's a different business model. Our service, we do not charge you to use it, so you can do test recoveries as often as you would like. So if you ever have a bad dream and you want to verify that everything's good, go ahead and do a full recovery. We had a partner a couple months ago that had a RAID card failure, and he booted up the whole network into the cloud and ran the business from there for 2 weeks to give he and his staff time to do shopping to find not just replacement hardware, but to find the right solution. A lot of times when you have a disaster, the technical team is really put to the fire to do things as quick as possible. So a lot of shortcuts are taking, and there's a lot of to-dos kind of noted on the side of, and those to-dos end up becoming permanent to-dos, right? They never get done. And then the next time something bad happens, you'll hear it very commonly from techs like, oh, I don't know who set up your network, but they set it up in a really weird way, or they didn't know what they were doing. Well, likely it was because it was set up in a hair is on fire type of situation, and they had to cut corners, and then they just didn't have the time to go back to it. And that's all because of how bulky and their backup plan was. All right, so we'll do a drum roll, drum. Phil, who won the Amazon Echo?
Mr. Casey Shannon.
All right, Casey, come on down. You're taking home a brand new Amazon Echo. Alexa will interrupt your conversations and tell you what the weather is when you're just trying to have a nice coffee conversation. All right, so we have some other questions. We'll stick around as long as you have questions. And again, if you have additional, more specific topics you'd like to actually discuss, over the phone or face-to-face, give us a ring, 612-230-7440, and we'll be happy to do everything. And again, the one thing that I would recommend for everyone is let Pivotalogic give you a free 15-minute downtime evaluation. It's going to calculate your cost of downtime, and it's going to look at 6 very common backup and DR scenarios: ransomware, hardware failure, VIP laptop failure, all the major issues that you would need to consider. And then what you'll end up seeing is how long it would take to recover based on what you have in place today, and how much that would cost you potentially based on your cost of downtime, and then what it would be if you had a DR solution in place. And if you want to pursue next steps with Pivotalogic, we'd love that. But at the very least, you can validate that everything's set up properly and you're good to go, and it doesn't cost you anything to get that additional validation. Best case scenario, you find that you have some major holes that can be easily plugged, and Pivotalogic or your team can go out and plug those holes. All right, I have another question. Does this have to be, is this a monthly service cost, or is it an all at once purchase? I'll let Philip kind of take that, but I know some of you in government and education might have an issue with recurring payments, and Infrascale is actually the only CGIS compliant cloud backup and DR provider in the country, and this is a very common scenario with our CGIS customers and law enforcement, and it hasn't been a problem, so we'll be able to take care of you. But Phil, anything to comment on that?
Yeah, typically it's going to be a monthly fee based on the amount of data that you'd be storing. We can also work out creativity on paying annual payments. So if it's you need to pay a one-time annual payment, you can do that. So we're flexible in the payment plans and based on the budget and how they pay for services within your organization.
Terrific. And with that, I think we'll end it there. So again, thank you all for attending. We hope we were able to bring some new information to light for you. At the very least, just doing our part to help everyone who uses a computer not become a victim of this terrible epidemic that we have in ransomware. So thank you, and have a good one.
Have a good day. Take care.